The Australia's commodities boom. Swing, wing, 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 wing. Australia! Ladies and gentlemen, this is a video presentation brought to you by 5 people. Farizmi, Geraldine, Teo Qi Ting Gina, and Asy'ari. We shall, to the best of our abilities, shed some light on the matter, armed with the economic concepts the school has taught us through the years.
And now, we would like to give you a brief background on Australia. Unlike Singapore, Australia has vast quantities of natural resources which they can take advantage of either by consuming it directly or exporting it.
Some examples of these commodities are coal, which is useful in the production of electricity, gas, iron, which is important in construction and manufacturing, and not forgetting uranium. And now, a story of how the emerging Asian economies enter the picture.
Jang 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 jang. The emerging Asian economy.
The Asian economies which are emerging in the world will need to consume more natural resources. They will thus approach Australia as she provides the resources they need. Since the Asian economy has obtained the resources, they will produce the capital goods which are then bought by Australia at a cheaper price.
With the relatively cheaper imports purchased from EAE, Australia would then be able to produce cheaper finished goods, which will then allow Australia to be more competitive in the global market.
Cheaper finished goods and emerging Asian economies will lead to an increase in demand for finished goods and an increase in demand for raw materials. Representing this on the demand and supply diagram, the increase in demand for finished goods and raw materials will cause a rightward shift of the demand curve. This is because to buy Australian goods, they have to purchase it using Australian dollar. Thus, demand for Australian dollar will increase. As seen in the diagram, the rightward shift in demand have caused the price of Australian dollar to increase. In other words, the Australian dollar have appreciated.
With the appreciation of the Australian dollar, local producers will suffer losses. How this happens will be discussed later on. Australian exports will also become more expensive in the global market, which will diminish the positive effect caused by the cheaper imports from EAE. Small businesses who are unable to compete will be forced to close down, while large businesses will inevitably suffer losses.
To resolve this problem, our group has suggested to impose tariffs. When the finished goods leaves Asia, they can be exported at a certain sum, say X dollars. However, when the goods reach Australia, they are required to pay the import tariff. Therefore, instead of purchasing the goods at X dollar, they pay more. This is how it is represented on the demand and supply diagram. Before the tariff, the world price is below the equilibrium price. Therefore, the quantity between the supply and demand curve are imported. Thus, instead of the local producers earning the original revenue, they will only earn the area in green. However, with tariff, the world price will increase and the quantity imported will be reduced. Also, the local producers will earn more revenue. The positive impacts of imposing tariff. Before import tariffs are implemented, the quantity of imported finished goods are much greater than the local finished goods in the market. However, after implementing tariffs, the quantity of imported finished goods will decrease. In this way, the local producers can earn more revenue.
Besides having better profits for the local firms compared to before, tariffs also allow the government to earn extra revenue from the import tariffs. Negative impacts. By implementing tariffs, international trade ties could be threatened. For example, America might choose to refuse exports from Australia since Australian policy reduces demand for America's export. However, countries such as EAEs have no choice but to continue trading with Australia, as they need Australia's raw materials. Consumer sovereignty also suffers because consumers are pressured to purchase local goods which may be of a similar quality. however at a higher price. Besides tariffs, our group also suggests quotas to help resolve the problem. Quotas work by physically limiting the amount of import to Australia. This way, Australia will no longer have access to the world's supply. This limits the total supply of a certain good within Australia to one that is slightly greater than the domestic supply. This is represented on a demand and supply curve with a leftward shift of the supply curve. This increases the price of the goods from the world prices, allowing local producers to enjoy greater revenue. Negative impacts. However, unlike tariffs, the government is unable to gain revenue from the quotas. Corruption is also prone as officials can be bribed to render the import quotas to become ineffective in Australia. Swing wing 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 wing. Swing wing 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 wing.